one of the very important questions that you need to ask yourself when you're measuring culture is what you are measuring. Are you measuring engagement or are you measuring culture? What we find with many of our clients is that they actually use engagement as a proxy for culture. So they are measuring engagement and they're thinking that they are measuring culture. However, my point of view is that culture and engagement are two different things. Culture is very much organizational. Culture is the patterns of behavior that are encouraged or discouraged in the organization, and it is not volatile. Engagement, on the other hand, is volatile. Engagement measures the level of motivation that people have to do their work. It measures how committed they are to come to work and do their best. So engagement is a little bit volatile at times because it will depend on the environment and what's happened in the organization. Engagement is an outcome of culture. It is a lagging indicator. So by using engagement as a measure for culture, you are using a lagging indicator, and that may not always be the best thing. My point is you need to measure both engagement and culture. There is nothing at all to say that the employees of Wells Fargo were not engaged when they were creating bogus accounts for 3 million customers. There is nothing to say that the employees of Volkswagen were not engaged when they were using a software to cheat on emissions testing. If anything, the data shows that they were very engaged. So you can have an organization with very high engagement scores, but people are doing the wrong thing. So don't think that because you've got high engagement, you've got the culture that you need. At the same time, you can sometimes have low engagement scores, and the reason the engagement is low can come from your culture. So I would now like to share with you a case study from a past client of ours in the transport industry. The problem they were having is that their engagement scores were getting lower and lower over time. And it was reaching a point that they really needed to do something about it. The organization was very successful, it was profitable, employees were passionate about the work, they loved what they were doing. However, the engagement was still very low. So we conducted an assessment of the culture for the organization. We used a methodology of focus groups because we thought that we really need to understand what was under the bonnet. So we needed to know why the culture was the way it was so that we could find the link between the culture and the engagement scores. To do this, we used a framework of 6 cultural archetypes. Those archetypes, if you want, are a little bit like a personality type for organizations. And any organization has a combination of the 6 archetypes. However, 2 or 3 of those archetypes are usually prevalent. So we use this framework when we do the assessment of the culture, but we also use this framework when we assess and determine what the target culture of an organization should be. So for our clients, this is what the target culture looked like. They had determined that to be successful in the next 5 years, they needed to put the customer at the heart of everything they were doing. And to do this, they needed to be collaborative, work as one team, and be supported by a strong sense of accountability. Now, let's look at what we found when we conducted the assessment. This picture shows and compares the current culture with the target culture. In the current culture, you have 2 colors. You have blue and you have red. The blue element is what we call healthy. The red element is what we call unhealthy, when those values that are present in the archetype are not expressed well and are not optimized. So for example, an unhealthy version of one team would be silos. So if you look at that diagram, what you can see first is that there is a big gap in customer centricity between the target culture and between the current culture. So our client would have to do a lot of work to put customers at the center of everything they were doing. And what we found is that they could not be possible until they had solved their engagement issues. Now, when we looked at what was happening in the organization, we found three patterns of behavior that were an issue. The very first pattern of behaviors can be found in the red element of the achievement archetype. What was happening was the following, that this client went on a very large program of change, but they were not very good at execution. They were very good at developing strategy, but failing a little bit in execution. So a lot of programs were happening. There was a can-do attitude in the organization. People embraced the change. However, they started getting tired, and that affected the empowerment. The second pattern of behavior that we found was an excessive focus on results at any cost. So this focus on results at any cost, after 2 or 3 years, starting weighing on people. They found it really hard to deal with, especially when the organization started being healthy again. So that second pattern of behavior was directly impacting the engagement, the more so as one belief appeared in the organization, which was its profits versus people. So with this belief being prevalent in the organization, of course, you're going to have low engagement. Then what we found as well is that because the whole organization and the leadership in particular, the leadership team and the senior managers of these organizations rushed to embrace that massive change program, they stopped listening to each other. They stopped asking each other for input. So over time, people stopped speaking up because it made no difference and because people didn't want to hear it anyway. So people stopped asking each other for input, and a belief appeared that I am not valued. That belief that is now prevalent in the organization, I am not valued, is driving once again very, very low engagement. And to finish it off, it also drove the creation of silos in the organization, and that creation of silos is also impacting the lower engagement. I would like to summarize by saying that if you want to measure culture, you need to be very clear on what you are measuring. Are you measuring engagement or are you measuring culture? And if you are measuring culture, not only do you need to measure it to know what it looks like, but you also really need to know why it is the way it is, because the why is your target for change. Thank you.